Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zoom Tikkun, fifth annual Zoom right before the Shavuot holiday. We will now start with Rabbi Professor David Golinkin. David, bavakasha.
Thank you. Erev Tov from Jerusalem. Here in Israel, it is a good day because 4 of the hostages were freed. God willing, they should all be freed in the near future. We're, of course, very sorry that one of the Israeli soldiers was killed in doing so, but we hope for the best. We have 3 shiurim, 3 classes this evening in connection with the holiday of Shavuot. I will be teaching about the subject of biblical criticism in Jewish law. Dr. Tamar Kadari will be talking about Ruth Boaz and the midnight meeting on the threshing floor. It sounds like a mystery novel. And Dr. Shula Letterman will be teaching us about how did the rounded 10 Commandments become a major Jewish symbol. All 3 topics are fascinating. They all demand more than half an hour, but we will do the best that we can. As Josh mentioned at the beginning, my complete responsum is found in the chat. For those of you who like books, it appeared in my book, Response in a Moment, Volume 5. I believe it's the longest responsum that I ever published. And in Hebrew, it appeared in my book, Aseh L'Charav, Volume 1. I'm not going to teach the entire responsum because we simply don't have time to do that. I'm going to teach one part of the responsum, which is whether it is permissible to study source criticism. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, source criticism says or maintains that the Torah is made up of 4 or perhaps 5 major sources that were written at different periods of time. The most classic example is the book of Devarim, where the Bible itself seems to tell us that the book of Devarim was written later on than the rest of the Torah. The language of Devarim is different. The theology seems to be different. The subject of where the temple is supposed to be seems to be different. There are many, many major differences between Devarim and the other parts of the Torah. And the biblical critics, starting in the 19th century, divided the Torah into 4 sources. And many famous rabbis, such as Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, said that it is forbidden to say that various parts of the Torah were given at various periods of time, or to say that a human editor, such as Moshe Rabbeinu, was involved in editing the Torah. I was asked this question many years ago by one of our rabbinical students, whether it's permissible to study biblical criticism. I spent a number of years researching the subject. If you read my complete responsum in English or in Hebrew and look at the bibliography at the end, you will see that the subject is almost endless. And I am not going to talk here about text criticism, which is correcting the text of the Bible based on manuscripts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, the Vulgate, and other ancient sources. That most rabbis agree is perfectly permissible. And not only that, many, many famous rabbis engaged in text criticism of the Torah. What I'm going to do this evening in honor of Shavuot is discuss the more difficult subject, which is source criticism. Can we say that various parts of the Torah were given at different times, or that there was a human editor involved, such as Moshe Rabbeinu, or perhaps someone else? And what I'm going to do is share with you the abbreviated version of this responsum, which I will now put on screen, I hope. Share screen. And this, interestingly enough, I was asked to submit this to the website, which is called thetorah.com, which is a very interesting website. Many leading Bible scholars write there, which was basically started by modern Orthodox Jews. So it was interesting that they asked me to participate in a symposium on the permissibility of studying source criticism. And this is my very abbreviated version of what I wrote in my lengthy responsum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the abbreviated version, and I'm going to quote some of the sources in the Hebrew original and give you a sense of my major thesis. And then hopefully you will go to the chat and link to the entire responsum, which is found on the Schechter Institute website, and you can read it at your leisure, perhaps before Shavuot, or if you print it out on Shavuot. Many Orthodox Jews object to source criticism because they say that it contradicts the doctrine of Torah from Sinai, in Hebrew, Torah Sinai, as mandated by the Talmud of Maimonides. I believe that it is permissible to study source criticism. I would first like to present the sources which would seem to indicate that it is not, and then other sources as a reply to those sources. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin, chapter 10, says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba. The entire Jewish people have a place in the world to come. Ve'elu she'en lahem chelek la'olam haba. And these are those who do not have a place in the world to come. And then there's a long list. And one of the things in the list is, it says, Ve'en Torah min hashamayim, and that the Torah is not from heaven. Now, there are parallels to that Mishnah, and I bring all of them in my responsum, but I'm just going to quote one of them now, and that is from Sanhedrin Folio 99a, which I summarized here in the English. The Hebrew says, Tenor Rabbanan, our sages have taught, and they quote a verse from Bamidbar chapter 15, which says, Ki devar Hashem baza, for he has despised the word of God. And one of the Braitot, one of the Tanaitic teachings about that verse says, Ki dvar Hashem baza, zeh ha'omer ein Torah min hashamayim. That is a person who says the Torah is not from heaven. Ve'afilu amar kol ha'Torah kula min hashamayim, chutz mi pasuk zeh, shelo amaro HaKadosh Baruch Hu ela Moshe mipi atzmo, zehu ki dvar Hashem baza. And even a person who says that the entire Torah is from heaven, except from this verse, for this verse, which was not recited by God, but by Moshe himself, that person has transgressed the verse, Ki dvar Hashem baza, he has despised the word of God. Let me see if I can make this go down a bit. Or as I translated here, he has spurned the word of the Lord. Now, Maimonides, who was extremely strict on this subject, he goes one step further than what it says in Sanhedrin. And he says in the laws of tshuva, the laws of repentance, chapter 3, Shlosha hein hakofrim b'Torah. There are three who are apostates against the Torah, who deny the Torah. And the first one is Ha'omer she'en Torah me'im Hashem, who says that the Torah is not from God. Afilu pasuk echad, even one verse, which is what we saw in Sanhedrin. Afilu teva achat, even one word. Im amar Moshe amaro mipi atzmo, if he said that Moshe said that one word by himself, harei ze kofer b'Torah, he is a heretic. That's what Maimonides said in his Mishneh Torah in the 12th century. And now we skip forward to the 20th century. And here I'm going to utilize my lengthy responsum because I don't have it on this sheet of paper in front of you. And this is a very interesting tshuva, very interesting responsum by Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was the leading Orthodox or Haredi posek in the United States in the 20th century. He died in 1985. And he wrote response on many, many topics. And in 1975, which was 10 years before Rabbi Feinstein passed away, a rabbi in Jerusalem named Rabbi Yitzchak Shimshon Lange published a book which was called Perushei Torah Rabbi Judah Chassid, the Torah commentaries of Rabbi Judah the Pious. Rabbi Judah the Pious is the author of Sefer Hasidim. He died in Regensburg in the year 1217. He is not only a very famous medieval rabbi, he's considered one of the most pious medieval rabbis. That's why his book was called Sefer Hasidim, the Book of the Pious. Now, in this commentary published from manuscript, and we're going to see some examples in a few minutes, in 4 different places, Rabbi Judah the Pious engages in what we today call source criticism. he says that those verses were edited or written by Moshe Rabbeinu, or were edited or written by the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly lived in the 5th century before the Common Era. In other words, some 700 years after Moshe Rabbeinu. And here, this very famous medieval rabbi, Rabbi Judah the Pious, who's more or less a contemporary of Maimonides, is engaging in what we call source criticism. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was asked what to do with this book. The book had already been published. Should the book be maintained, or should the book be put in a geniza? He ruled that it is forbidden to print this book, even the parts that do not contain heresy. He relied upon the passage cited from Sanhedrin, which we quoted a moment ago, and he relied on Maimonides, whom we quoted a moment ago. And then he extended the scope of the prohibition in 2 directions. I'm quoting now Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. And one who says that there is even one letter that Moses wrote on his own denies the Torah and is in the category of one who has spurned the word of the Lord, that verse quoted in Sanhedrin. And all the more so one who says that there is something that was not written by Moses but by others. In other words, the Sanhedrin passage said that if you say one verse was not written by God, you have spurned the Torah. Maimonides said one word, and Rav Moshe Feinstein said one letter. That if you say even one letter was not written by God, but by Moshe Rabbeinu or by another prophet, then you have spurned the word of the Torah, and this is what Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote in his responsum. So even though the book is now a rare book, it is on the shelf in the National Library of Israel, and of course it was reprinted. So much for the efforts to censor that particular commentary of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. And if we go back to Maimonides, we see that he was entirely consistent in this matter. And I'm looking again at my summary here. Indeed, Maimonides says in his Mishnah commentary to Sanhedrin, to the Mishnah and Sanhedrin, the Hebrew says, or the Hebrew translation from his Judeo-Arabic says, Shehu b'ma'alat lavlar shekorim lefanav v'hu kotev kula tarichea v'sipurea u'mitzvotea. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu was simply taking dictation. He was like a court stenographer today, that they read before him, and he wrote it all down, its dates and its stories and its mitzvot. In other words, Moshe did not have any input in what it says in the Torah. He was simply a secretary or a stenographer writing down what God said to Moshe at Mount Sinai. So if we stopped here, we could say it's absolutely forbidden to study source criticism. It's forbidden by the Mishnah, it's forbidden by Sanhedrin, it's forbidden by Maimonides, and it's forbidden by Rav Moshe Feinstein. However, zelo kol kach pashut, it's not so simple. From a halachic point of view, these sources are far from conclusive. Maimonides and Rabbi Feinstein based their rulings on agadic sources. All the sources we just studied, the Mishnah and Sanhedrin, the Talmud and Sanhedrin, as well as some other sources which I did not quote, are not halacha, they are agadah. We know from many places in the Talmud that when it says that he who does such and such, ein lo chelek l'olam haba, he has no place in the world to come, that is not a halachic statement, that is an agadic statement. And in my responsum, my lengthy responsum on page 8, I give 5 other examples of the use of this term. Rabbi Akiva says, he who reads Svarim Chitzoniyim, external books, has no share in the world to come. Rabbi Akiva says, he who sings the Song of Songs with a tremulous voice at a banquet, as if it were a secular song, has no share in the world to come. One who follows a woman in the river has no share in the world to come, because there's a lack of tzniut, of modesty. And last but not least, among Baba Metzia, the Mishnah and Pirkei Avot, Hamabin pnei chavero barabim en lo chelek l'olam haba. A person who embarrasses his friend in public has no place in the world to come. These are very important agadic statements of how we should behave. They are not halachic statements. And indeed, in this particular case, the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, who is the basis for almost everything in the Rambam's code of Mishneh Torah, and the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, and the Tur, and the Shulchan Aruch, I'm listing here the most famous codes of Jewish law in the medieval period, they all ignore these agadic passages because they are agadic passages, they are not halachic passages. Furthermore, the Rambam's halachic ruling cited above is surprising, since the Rambam himself stated in 3 different places in his commentary to the Mishnah, and this is a quote, he says almost the exact same words 3 times, that in every debate between the sages that does not depend on action, but merely determines opinion, there is no reason to render a halachic decision in accordance with one of them. In other words, the Rambam explicitly states in 3 places in his commentary on the Mishnah that regarding matters of belief, regarding matters of opinion, there is no need to, if you'll excuse the Yiddishism, paskin halacha. There is no need to decide halacha on those matters. These are matters of opinion. These are matters of belief. There is no need to render a halachic decision. In other words, the Rambam in the Laws of Repentance, when he gives a halachic decision about what we think about the Torah is divine or not divine, written by Moses, not written by Moses, according to the Rambam's own commentary to the Mishnah in 3 places, there is no need to render a halachic decision on those issues. And now we switch to the other side of the coin. I'm now going to show you that there were many famous rabbis, both in the Talmudic period and in the medieval period, who did exactly what Maimonides and Rav Moshe Feinstein said is forbidden. They engaged in source criticism. And the most famous passage is found in the tractate of Gittin, folio 60a-b. And I have here, again, in my complete responsum, I have the complete text of that Talmudic passage. And there are 3 opinions there in that Talmudic passage. One of them is a fundamentalist opinion of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says the Torah was given complete. And he quotes a verse to prove that. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Levi disagree. And I summarized it here in the paragraph in front of you. Rabbi Yochanan was the most famous Amorah, rabbi of the Talmudic period, who died in the Galil in the year 279 of the Common Era. He says in the name of Rabbi Bena'ah, the Torah was given megillot. The Torah was given scroll by scroll. And he quotes a verse from Psalms, see, I will bring a scroll of the book recounting what befell me in order to prove his opinion. In other words, the Torah was not given at the same time at Mount Sinai. It was given scroll by scroll over a long period of time. And a similar, though not identical opinion is expressed by Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi was apparently a 3rd generation Amorah, 1 generation after Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Shmona Parshiot Batorah Ne'emru Bo Bayom, that they were said on the day on which the Mishkan, on which the tabernacle was erected. And then he lists them. I did not list them in the summary in front of them. He says that the following passages were not given at Mount Sinai, but were given on the day on which the Mishkan was erected, which was on the 1st of Nisan. The parasha of the priests, Leviticus 21, the parasha of the Levites, Numbers 8, the parasha of the unclean, Numbers 9, the parasha of expelling the unclean, Numbers 5, the parasha of Acharei Mot, Leviticus 16, the parasha of the intoxicated, Leviticus 10, the parasha of the lamps of the menorah, Numbers 8, and the parasha of the red heifer, Parah Duma, Numbers 19. In other words, 2 out of these 3 Amoraim from roughly the same period of time in the 3rd century say that the entire Torah was not given at Mount Sinai, but was given at different periods of time. Rabbi Levi saying that 8 parshiot, 8 passages were given on another occasion. And Rabbi Yochanan saying that the Torah was given megillot, a little bit at a time, not stating exactly when or where. Similarly, three rabbinic sources. Whoops, I went too far. Sifrei Numbers, Sifrei Zuta, and Babylonian Talmud Tractate of Shabbat indicate something that you may have noticed, especially if you're a Torah reader, which is that when you get to Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 10, you'll see the famous passage, Vayhi bin so Aaron vayomer Moshe, which we sing every time we take the Torah out of the ark. And if you look in a Torah scroll or in a Tikkun, you'll see that it's in brackets. The brackets look like this. Those brackets were not invented by the printer. Those brackets are found in every copy of the Torah, of the handwritten Torah in the world. And the question is, what are those brackets doing there? And the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah, who talk about the brackets, say that the brackets were put there lilamed she'ein ze mekoma, to teach us that this is not its place, that this is not the correct place for this passage in the Torah. It really belongs somewhere else. In other words, Moses was not just a copyist of the Torah, as Maimonides claimed, but he was also an editor of the Torah, right? The Hebrew says, Nakud alav milamala umilamata. It has the brackets above it and below it. Mipnei shelo haya ze mekomo, because this is not the correct place for where this passage belongs. And Moses, serving as editor, he wanted us to know that this is not the correct place, so he put the passage in brackets. The most far-reaching rabbinic passage about source criticism is the passage by Rabbi Abahu, which is found in Midrash Tanchuma. And again, I'm going to quote from the longer version of my responsum. Midrash Tanchuma Kitisa. It's talking about what Moses did at Mount Sinai. At the end, and Moses was complaining to God during the time that he's up there for 40 days. 40 days have passed and I don't know anything. What did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? At the end of the 40 days, he gave him the Torah as a gift. Did Moses learn all of the Torah? Is his measure not, it does not say in Job, its measure is longer than the earth. Rather, the Holy One, blessed be he, taught Moses general principles. The Hebrew word is klalim, as it is said when he finished, Kiechaloto. And what this seems to mean is that, according to Rabbi Abahu, God taught Moses the Torah in general principles, which then Moses developed into specific laws. In other words, according to this passage in Midrash Tanchuma, apparently Moses was not a secretary or a stenographer taking dictation. God taught him the general principles, and Moshe Rabbeinu turned them into laws. This sounds like a very modern critical idea from biblical criticism. Here it is stated by Rabbi Abahu, living in Caesarea in the middle of the 3rd century. And finally, regarding the Talmudic passages, we have two famous passages in Makot and Baba Batra, which talk about the last 8 verses of the Torah, which of course talk about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. And one rabbi says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote those verses while he was crying, because it meant that he was going to die. Other rabbis says that Joshua wrote the last 8 verses of the Bible. In other words, those 8 verses were not written by Moshe Rabbeinu. And the most interesting passage there says that the Ir Miklat passage, the passage about the cities of refuge, what do you do when you kill someone by accident, was written by Joshua and not by Moshe Rabbeinu. So again, these Talmudic passages talk about source criticism, certain passages of the Torah that were not written by Moshe Rabbeinu, but were written down by Joshua. And then when we get to the medieval period, and unfortunately now I don't have time to share these actual sources with you, but you can read them in my responsum, we find many famous medieval rabbis engaging in what we call source criticism. I'm just going to mention 3 of them. The Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, He says in one place in his commentary on the Torah, regarding Genesis chapter 1, this entire passage describing the 6 days of creation was also placed first by Moses in order to explain to you what the Holy One, blessed be He, said at the giving of the Torah, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In other words, the Rashbam says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the editor of the Torah, and he placed this passage at the very beginning of the Torah. Furthermore, we have 5 famous passages in the Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra in the 12th century, and this is on page 24 of my responsum. And in those passages, he says that the specific verses he is discussing were written later on. The most famous passage is V'hakna'ani az ba'aretz, Genesis chapter 12, and the Canaanites were then in the land, which means that when that passage in the Torah was written, the Canaanites were no longer in the land, which means the passage was written after the Jews entered the land of Israel with Joshua. And furthermore, Ibn Ezra says to Deuteronomy 34, in my opinion, Joshua began writing from this verse. Again, these are the words of Joshua, and so on and so forth. In other words, in 5 specific places, Ibn Ezra says that certain verses in the Torah were written after the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. And I think that the best way to summarize this approach, which is my approach, is in the words of Rabbi Yosef Bonfils. Rabbi Yosef Bonfils, in Hebrew, is called Rabbi Yosef Tov Elim, which is a translation of Bonfils in the French, a good son. Rabbi Yosef Bonfils, born in 1335, wrote a commentary on Ibn Ezra. You got to love the Jewish people. Only the Jews write commentaries on commentaries. In his commentary on Ibn Ezra, which was only published, I believe, in the 19th century, in discussing that passage of Ibn Ezra and the Canaanites were then in the land, Ve'achar sheyesh lanu la'amin b'divrei Kabbalah u'b'divrei Nevuah, mali sheketavo Moshe o sheketavo Navi acher, ho'il v'divrei kulam emet vehem b'nevuah. And since we are supposed to believe in the words of tradition and prophecy, what difference does it make if Moses wrote it or a different prophet, since all their words are true and prophetic? In other words, all of these Talmudic and medieval rabbis believed in Torah from heaven, but not in Torah from Sinai. They believed in Torah min hashamayim and not in Torah mi Sinai. The Torah is the result of progressive revelation over the course of many centuries, as opposed to a one-time event at Mount Sinai. In other words, if a person wants, they can follow the fundamentalist approach of Maimonides and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, but that is not the only approach. Either we have to say that the Rashbam and Ibn Ezra and Rabbi Judah the Pious and Rabbi Yochanan are apikorsim, or heretics, and have no place in the world to come, or we have to say that there are different approaches to this subject in Jewish tradition. Maimonides and Rav Moshe Feinstein follow the fundamentalist approach, saying that every single word and every single letter was given at Mount Sinai, which is apparently what Reish Lakish taught. But Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Levi and the Rashbam and Ibn Ezra and Rabbi Judah the Pious and many other famous rabbis said that they believe in Torah min hashamayim, in Torah from heaven. The Torah was given at different periods of time to different prophets, and that explains some of the contradictions in the Torah, and it also explains the different Hebraic style between certain passages in the Torah and other passages in the Torah. I can conclude by saying the Idach Zil Gemor, the rest is commentary, go and learn. I suggest that if you want to study this subject thoroughly, you study my very lengthy responsum, and there you will see all of the sources and the modern responsa and articles written on this topic. Toda rabah, thank you very much. And now we segue briefly to our second shiur with Dr. Tamar Kadari. And she is, of course, going to deal with the book of Ruth, which is one of the favorite things we do on the holiday of Shavuot. We read the book of Ruth. Of course, in the diaspora, you have to decide on which day you're reading Akdamut and which day you're reading the book of Ruth. In Israel, we have no such choice. We read both of them on the same day of Shavuot, the only day of Shavuot. And therefore, Dr. Tamar Kadari, a senior lecturer in Midrash at Schechter, will now share her insights on one of these stories in the book of Ruth.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. I'll share my screen. Okay, so we will read from chapter 3 in Ruth. This is really the climax of the story. So just a short brief about the things told in the chapter before. There's a very bad famine in the land of Israel, and Naomi leaves together with her husband Elimelech and her two sons Machlon and Kilion. Elimelech is a very wealthy person, but they leave the land of Israel to Moab and live there for more than 10 years. During their stay, Machlon and Kilion marry the two women from Moab, and but during these 10 years, Elimelech dies, and Machlon and Kilion, the two sons of Naomi, die. And she is left without nothing, just with her two daughters-in-law. Then she decides to go back to Bethlehem, where she came from. And her daughters-in-law come with her, but then Orpah turns around and goes back to Moab, but Ruth clings to Naomi. And she says, "Your people are my people, your God is my God, and only death will part." So Naomi goes back to Bethlehem. She's very bitter. She calls herself Mara, bitter, for her misfortune. And they arrive in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Very luckily, Ruth goes and finds a place where she can glean in the fields, and she gets to the field of Boaz, who is a man of substance and also a kinsman of Elimelech. Boaz is a mighty man of valor, Ish Chayil, Gibor Chayil, and Ruth stays there. He pleads her to stay close to his girls during all the time of harvest. And this is where we get to chapter 3, as I said, the climax of the story, and we'll read this together. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, to Ruth, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." I'm stopping here, and let's see the text. I'll enlarge it if that's needed. So, why did Naomi wait during all the summer to ask and request Ruth to do this act? Why didn't she address her earlier? Why didn't he do anything during the time of the harvest? So we can suggest a few answers to this question. So the harvest is over. They are now winnowing. So we know the different stages, harvest, threshing, winnowing. And now they're winnowing the barley. So if the harvest is over, maybe Naomi thinks they may not meet anymore, because Ruth will not go to the fields anymore. So maybe that is the reason she's addressing her now, saying, "This is our last chance to address Boaz before the end of this time." And maybe she was waiting. Maybe she thought that during the time of the harvest, Boaz is not at ease. He's concerned if everything will go well. Will it not rain in the middle of the harvest? So now he feels he's at ease, he's satisfied, he's relaxed. He will be able to say yes to Ruth's request. And I also want to point out that the whole book of Ruth is like a production of bread. We follow these different stages. We see the process from the gathering the wheat and barley, then the harvest, the threshing, the winnowing, and we are waiting for the bread, the fertility, the reap of the benefits. So we are waiting through the end of this journey, following this chapter. We can also ask, why does Naomi want Ruth to address Boaz during the night? Is that a common thing to do, coming to the threshing floor? So she probably wanted it to be quiet, in secrecy. No one should be around during this day. And the darkness also blurs the class differences of gender and nationality. Ruth is a woman. She's a Moabite. She's poor. And doing this, approaching him during the night will blur these differences between them. And this is, of course, also a symbolic act, an act of marriage, because if he will sleep with her during this night, he's actually taking her as a wife. So it's important that this will be done during the night. It's also done in a lot of privacy, maybe because of the status of Boaz. As we said, he's a very great and wealthy person. This could not be done in daylight in front of many, many people. It has to be done quietly. Just Ruth and Boaz, just the two of them discussing this matter. So if we see how Naomi is addressing Ruth, and she gives her a lot of instructions and how she should prepare herself to this meeting. She says you should bathe, anoint yourself, dress up. And she also gives her very specific instructions. You should wait that Boaz will finish to eat and drink. Only after he lies down will you come up to him. So he has to be in a good situation. She has to be she has to look well, and everything has to be in the most optimistic way as possible. Now we have to ask ourselves, what were really the intentions of Naomi? What did she really think is going to happen during this night? If she says, wash, anoint, put on your cloak, and she says, wait until he lies down, observe the place where he lies, uncover his feet, lay down. So what did she really intend of this situation? What did she want things to happen? What could happen? He could sleep with her and have sexual relations. Maybe that was Naomi's intention. If he does that, then he must marry her. Having sexual relations is a kind of a way of marrying also a woman during this time. So maybe that was her intention. But he could always also get very, very angry, throw out, disgrace her. Or he could say, okay, I will take the commitment. And he was a redeemer. He was the kinsman. So he should be her redeemer. And these are different options of things that could happen. And it's a risk. Ruth is taking a very big risk. He could take advantage of her, or he could respect her, and she does not know how he will respond. Her good name is at stake, and she's also risking the possibility of getting married with any decent guy if he will say no. And we can see how Naomi understands this, because when she addresses her, she says, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you it will be good, will be well with you, meaning she's looking for a home for her happiness. So we can really see how Naomi is trying to convince her that she's doing this also for her, as well as for herself. Now we are very anxious. We're in suspense. We're waiting to see what will happen during this night. What is going to happen between Ruth and Boaz? So let's continue reading the story. So she went down to the threshing floor and did as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of valor. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lay down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment that you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "Who are you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matters turn out, for the man will not rest until he settle the matter today." So, did Ruth exactly perform and follow the instructions of Naomi? In general, yes, but there is one very important verse, something that she adds by herself. And I'm referring to verse 9. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." These words of Ruth are not something that Naomi told her to say. This is something she added by herself. Why did she use these special words? Why did she use this symbol of spreading a wing, this allegorical kind of language? Spread your wings over your servant. It's a very special expression. And if we remember, in the 2nd chapter, Boaz uses just the same language when he approaches Ruth. And Boaz said in reply, when he meets Ruth in the first time, "I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge." So also Boaz uses the wings and God's wings as a refuge for Ruth. And using these words, she applies to something he told her. And she says, "You spoke about wings, and here you have to spread your wings upon me. This is what God had planned for us. So, did anything happen at the threshing floor between the two of them? If we look at what the Torah tells us, the book of Ruth, it says that the man was startled, a woman lay at his feet, but it doesn't really express that something sexual happened between the two of them. There are some interpreters that suggest this, modern interpreters, but I really believe that the Torah says whatever she wants to, and she doesn't hide from us anything, even the story of David or Judah and Tamar. The Torah never hides things, even if it's sexual, even if it's a wrongdoing. The Torah always tells us everything about the characters. So if this is not mentioned, I believe nothing really happened during that night. But Boaz tells her, and he says, do not fear, but he asks her, remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, let me know. Lie down until the morning. So why does he suggest her staying there during all the night? Why does she have to remain until the morning? We can understand that going out at night from this barn could be very dangerous for a girl. So maybe he is protecting her. And he lets her go out before a person can recognize each other, meaning no one will know she was there, but he will not let her go during the night. It's very, very dangerous for her. So we can see how he's concerned of her safety and well-being even before they are married. So didn't Naomi know there was a closer relative? Didn't Naomi know there was another redeemer that is closer than Boaz? Here, this redeemer is called Ploni Almoni in chapter 4. We use this name for people who do not have a name, but Ploni Almoni is a closer redeemer. And didn't Naomi know about this closer relative? She probably did know, of course. We can see that Naomi knows everything. She plans everything. She's behind all this very interesting night they had together. But I believe she thought Boaz is a better shidduch than Ploni Almoni. And maybe she understood that Ploni Almoni will refuse. And I also want to suggest that she saw the hand of God that brought these two people together. And she probably understood that they are a good match. So Boaz agrees. And he says, if this redeemer will not agree, I will redeem you. And this doing of his is a kind of chesed. We understand it as a deed of chesed. And also Ruth is acting in the same way, in this kind of kindness when she follows Naomi and brings food home and helps her during her difficult days. So these two people, although Ruth is a widow, we should say, she's a Moabite. She's very poor. She has no children of her own. But we can see they both have a big appreciation to each other. And they are both very generous people who act with chesed. And this is something very deep that connects them together. To show how serious he is, Boaz sends these 6 measures of barley and sends them with Ruth to the city to Naomi, meaning I'm very serious about what I mean to do. And he sent her with the barley to Naomi. And what's interesting is that when Ruth comes to Naomi, she came to her mother-in-law, she said, Who are you, my daughter? What did she want to hear exactly? Was she waiting to hear that something happened during the night? Did she wish that they had sexual relations together during that night? Or what exactly was she waiting to hear? Did she wait to see if Boaz said he will marry Ruth? And she says, then she told her all the man had done for her. And he showed her the 6 measures of barley. And he said, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. So she will not be empty-handed any longer, as we know. So Naomi's plan succeeded above and beyond what she thought will happen. And the two really marry happily ever after. And even one of their descendants is David the king. We will now turn to a few midrashim, the short time we have left, and see how the rabbis understood this midnight meeting between Boaz and Ruth. So, first of all, we can see that Ruth is described, Ruth's virtues are described in the Midrash. When Boaz said to the servant in the field, who was in charge of the reapers, who is this girl? Did he not recognize her? The Midrash asks, did Boaz not recognize Ruth? The meaning is that when he saw how attractive she was and how modest her attitude, he began to inquire concerning her. All the other women bend down to gather the ears of corn, but she sits and gathers. All the other women hitch up their skirts, and she keeps hers down. All the other women jest with the reapers, while she is reserved. All the other women gather from between the sheaves, while she gathers from that which is already abandoned. So, according to the Midrash, Ruth has many virtues. With her actions, the way she looks, her modesty, her moral behavior. This is her conversion was not only to Judaism, this is a theological conversion. She becomes a woman of valor with a lot of virtues. And this is the woman that Boaz is going to marry. So the Midrash really adds into her character. Concerning this night, let me just choose the best text. Okay. So let's read number 6. As the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning, says Boaz to Ruth. Rabbi Judah said, all that night his evil inclination contended with him, saying, you are unmarried and seek a wife, and she is unmarried and seeks a husband. Arise and have intercourse with her, and make her your wife. And he took an oath to his evil inclination, saying, as the Lord lives, I will not touch her. And to the woman he said, lie down until the morning. So according to this Midrash, this is a real temptation for Boaz. This night is a very big temptation for him. He finds out she's such an attractive woman and she's so close with him. No one is there. It's night. He can have intercourse with her, but he understands this as a kind of a nisayon. He thinks this is a kind of a test. God is testing him to see how he will behave, and he stands up to his evil inclination, and he says, when he takes the oath, he resists to his sexual temptation, and he says no. The Midrash also sees beyond this match, and I understand we're close to the end, so I'll just choose another Midrash. Okay, I love this one. In the Midrash Ruth Rabbah, it says as follows, number 8. Rabbi Eliezer said, Boaz played his part, Ruth played her part. Naomi played her part. Thereupon, upon the Holy One, blessed be he, said, I too must play mine. So we can see people are planning things. People are taking on responsibilities, and each one is doing his deeds, but also God is here behind everything. As Boaz played his part and said yes to Ruth, Ruth played her part, going with Naomi and marrying Boaz. And Naomi brought them, both of them together. God says, also I must play my part. And Ploni Almoni has to say no. And from Boaz and Ruth has to come the most important descendant, David, and also further on, the Messiah. And these 6 measures are understood, the 6 measures of barley that Boaz gave to Ruth are understood as 6 righteous men that arose from her and possessed 6 astounding verses: David, Chizkiyahu, Yoshiyahu, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and of course, the Messiah. So as we can see, these acts of kindness, of chesed, and resistance to sexual temptation, the moral behavior, and the acts of kindness together bear the descendant who will be the Messiah. So I want to end with these words. May our acts of kindness have a good and positive effect on heaven and bring us all a future of hope and redemption. Thank you very much.
Tamar, thank you very much. That was
Amen.
exciting. Now
Okay.
David, excuse me. Now we can go to Dr. Shulamit Lederman in the Arts and Judaism Department of Schechter. How did the rounded 10 Commandments become a Jewish symbol? Bevakasha, Shulamit. Shulamit, we can't hear you. You're still on mute. Please go off mute.
Okay.
Okay,
Now,
go ahead.
Okay.
Yofi.
Okay. So our topic is the 10 Commandments. I'm starting here with a synagogue, a ruined synagogue in Poland that is from the 1659. And we see lions supporting the crown over the 10 Commandments. Whenever we enter synagogues today, whether in Israel or abroad in the diaspora, we always will see the 10 Commandments, normally above the ark, or we'll see it also in other kind of books and things that are important, and we want them to look Jewish. The tablets, they are the version of the Decalogue. Decalogue means in Greek, decalogi, 10 words that appear on them in various shapes and forms, include 2 adjacent rectangles, and sometimes they have a round top. Now, interesting is that basically we are talking about Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 words, and then we talk about the 2 tablets, but we're not sure when did that image start. And that's what we were going to do today, try to follow the image of the 10 Commandments, and why is it called the 10 Commandments, and why is it shaped like you see here. The Decalogue appears in Exodus 20, 24, 35, Deuteronomy, and we know that that's what Moses got in Sinai, and it says that he got engraved on 2 tablets of stone. Now, the original set of stone tablets described in Exodus 32 was broken by Moses when he ascended, when he came and saw the golden calf and the Israelites dancing around it, and he couldn't bear it, and he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them beneath the mount. Now we remember that God is the one who basically he himself wrote it. It was Be'etzba Elohim with God's finger. So since the original tablets were broken, and then Moses was invited to come back to the mountain and to write the another set of tablets, we know that basically we don't really have any description of how it looked, because the first ones that were broken, the shivrei luchot, they shattered luchot, and the whole luchot were put in the ark, so nobody saw them. And so we don't really have a symbol or a way to look at them till much later. Now, Rachel Vishnitzer, who is a very important art historian, in her book on synagogue architecture, lists 10 synagogues architecture that have the tablets like you see here. And she tells the following story, which is quite charming. What you see here is a synagogue, Anshe Chesed, a synagogue in New York on Norfolk Street in Little Germany, they called it. It was a neighborhood that had German Jews, and they decided to renovate their synagogue and to put what you see here, which is really looks very goyish, but it's something that they did. They made this stained glass window, and the Moses is sitting here with the horns, and he is holding the 10 commandments that have 2 tablets and have a round top. And there's no room to put all the text, so there's only the Roman letters. Now, when everybody praised this very interesting, beautiful stained glass windows, but the people in the congregation were very annoyed. They thought it wasn't halachic, and they made an inquiry, and in the inquiry, it turns out that they were told that there's nothing against the halacha. There's no set rules about how to make this picture, and it's okay. But then some of the congregants decided, no, they don't like it, and so they took it off and made something else. So it's interesting. We're talking now here about 1850, the 19th century, and the way Jews are eager to make this kind of a symbol on their synagogue. Now, we have synagogues like this Portuguese synagogue from 1675. And here you see above the ark, you see the shape of the 10 commandments. Here there are 2 rectangles, and they're writing as much as they can. And it really tries to follow the text in Exodus 32. Now Moses turned and went down from the mountain bearing the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. Testimony, it's called, tablets inscribed from both sides, and one side and the other side, and exactly what the text says. Now the tablets were God's work, and the inscription was God's inscription engraved on the tablets. Now it came to pass when he drew closer to the camp, like I said before, and he saw what happened, that he broke this set of tablets. And we have many, many other examples where here is a historic synagogue ark that we have here. And again, we have the letters. And here you could see that they're already making the shape of the tabernacle, the tablets with a round top on top. But in real practice, the visual description of the tablets as a decorative symbol indicating the faith of Israel and appearing in a fixed form of 2 adjoining rectangles does not exist at all in ancient Jewish art. We have many symbols in ancient, we can see Goodenough, very important art historian, wrote 11 volumes of symbols that were found in ancient synagogue. None had 10 commandments. They had the Ark of the Covenant, they had shofar, lulav, etrog, but none of that. And only in the 11th century, there is a visual representation of the tablets in Christian art, and in Jewish art, only in the 13th century. Now, when you think about it, what's special about the 11th century? Why should it appear in the 11th century? And this is what we want to follow. Why? What created that urge to make this symbol? Now, we have here a Bible from 1084, the Tonei Grand Lobes Bible. And what you see here is it's a Christian Bible, but you see the ark with the ark of the testimony with the two cherubim, and we see here Moses holding the tablets that are shaped with two boards, two rectangles with the round top, and we have Aaron and all the tabernacle implements, but we don't really know why here in the 11th century, the Christian decided to make this picture. Now, the possibility that we find is that Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah, that speaks about the Luchot, Shivrei Luchot, the broken Luchot, tabernacle, the broken tablets, and the whole tablets, and they're talking about the need to make this in the 11th century and the 12th century as a result of the Crusades. We have now arguments which we find in the Bamidbar Rabbah. Professor Hananel Mack, who made a profound study of the Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah, refers to anti-Christian sermons in the Midrash. The Midrash points especially to the well-known Christian claim that Christianity is the true successor of Judaism and its teaching. Bamidbar Rabbah attacks the Christian claim of them being the true Israel, Verus Israel it's called, or Israel in the spirit, while the Jews accordingly thought that, the Christian saw the Jews as the people of the flesh that are not worthy of the 10 commandments, especially after the golden calf. So that what we see here in the Midrash is a very interesting thing, because the Bamidbar Rabbah and Moshe Darshan, that is also of the same period, are both from the 11th century. And they are the first ones to really argue, where later we can see all those public arguments against the Jews. But here they are making a sermon against this claim of the Christian that they are the ones that got the to be the people of the New Testament, of the New Covenant. And so this is what this whole thing is about. It starts here, and then the Jews respond. Now, it takes them 12th century, 13th century, and we'll see. Now, I'm giving you just few examples. This is a beautiful ark in an Italian synagogue. It was found in the city of Veneto and in a flourishing Jewish community. And you can see here the 10 commandments in this two rectangles with the round top. And the tablets become a symbol among the Jews only in the 15th centuries, in the Renaissance and in Italy. The ark is no longer, as we know, the ark before that was not a synagogue furniture, but it was a home. Rich people had arks for their home, but it wasn't in the synagogue until much later. And that's where they put the Ten Commandments, and the important part of the synagogue was the bima, where they read the law, and that was important. Now, I'm bringing you here a very interesting manuscript that's called, this is called the London Miscellany. The London Miscellany is from 1296, 13th century. It was made in northern France, but it is now in the British Library, and that's why it's called the London Miscellany. And in the picture, we see Moses holding the Ten Commandments in the shape of the arch, two rectangles. This becomes like the attribute. That's the thing that really symbolizes him. That's the thing that represents him, this kind of the Ten Commandments. And he's bringing it to the Jews, and they all have the special Jewish hats, meaning that the Ten Commandments become a Moses attribute, and for the Jews that have these hats that symbolizes them as Jews. Now, in my lecture today, I want to present a visual expression of the issues concerning the Ten Commandments in Jewish and Christian art, and try to answer the following question. Question A, is the visual form of the tablets in Christian and Jewish art related to the theological debate between Jews and Christians? And question B, what was the shape of the tablets and the Ark of the Covenant that contained them in Jewish art? Was the visual image created in accordance with the biblical and midrashic description, or is a polemical line of thought? And this is what we try to relate ourselves to. So we'll start with the Torah, looking as a scroll in Christian art. We have this mosaic, a Byzantine church of San Vitali in Ravenna from the 6th century, very important church. And what do we see here? Moses, it says Moses is coming up to Sinai, and he is giving the Torah, the commandments, or the Ten Commandments, he's giving by hand, the hand of God as a scroll. It's not, we don't see here tablets, we see a scroll. And it's interesting because according to the text of the Bible, Moses gave the people the tablets he had received from God, as well as the book of laws that he wrote at his behest, meaning there was at the end in Deuteronomy, we hear that he also, and we'll see that, gave a book of all the laws. But here we can see that it's shaped like a scroll. Now, we know that in the book of Schechter, it says, as I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me holding a written scroll. And in the book of Zechariah, it also says, I looked up again and I saw a flying scroll. So the scroll exists in the text, and this is what they chose to show with the hand of God. And that's very interesting because the hand of God appears for the first time in Jewish art, in Dura-Europos, which you'll see. And here the Byzantine artists took that same symbol. And here we have another Byzantine manuscript that's called the Christian Topography. And you see here the two, we have here the burning bush, but we have also Moses coming up to Sinai, and he's giving the scroll by the hand of God. And notice that his hands are covered because he's touching something very sacred. So he's covering it with his sleeves. And we can see that that's definitely a scroll. In Byzantine pictures, he receives the scroll, it's extended from the sky, and we have this special point of showing that it's so sacred that he covers his hands. Now, this one is from France. It's not a Byzantine, it's a Granville Bible from France from the 9th century. And the picture is divided to two. The top shows Moses in Sinai, and we can see that he's given a scroll. And here is Joshua waiting for him. And then the second part is what we find in chapter 24. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the ears of the people. So you could see that here it's a scroll, here it's a book. It's two rectangles that he reads, Sefer HaBrit, the book of the covenant. And we have both. Now, the Torah is also shown as square tablets in Christian art. And we see here, this is also a Christian manuscript, that Vatican Greco I Leo Bible. And here is Moses, and he's receiving a rectangle tablet up on top. We have also a very interesting symbols of the Ten Commandments in the Ecclesia and Synagoga in Strasbourg Cathedral. We'll see that in the 13th century, we have a lot of images of the synagoga, which is a symbolic representation of the Jewish people, against the Ecclesia, who is representing the Christian church. And so here you can see, here are the two images. They look like two sisters, but here they are. This is the Ecclesia. She's in the southern facade of the cathedral, and she's holding the cross, very, very erect and very proud. And against, on the other side is synagoga, which has her staff here broken. And as you see here, she's holding the 10 commandments that are a rectangle downwards. It's like a symbol of the defeat that you have. The synagogue is shown with her eyes covered, her crown fell. She's holding one hand a broken staff, and the other the tablets that you see here. The idea is that the synagogue is blind because she doesn't see the true content of the covenant, of the Torah, of the 10 Commandments. And that's why the Christian were given the New Testament, because the Jews were sinned and they lost their special covenant. Now, this is another very interesting Bible. This is the Alba Bible from Spain, from the 15th century. Alba Bible was written in Castile. Actually, was written. They were asked the Rabbi Aragel to translate it, and he didn't want to, but he was forced. And then the people that did the decoration did a lot of what he told them, midrashim, etc. But here you could see we have the two tablets that are rectangle, very heavy. They burden Moses, but he's holding them both. And this is what we have here. He's carrying two square stones of the 10 Commandments. Now we come, of course, to Michelangelo statue of Moses in the 16th century, and here he's holding the two tablets, and they are both rectangle. The two of them are rectangle, and he, of course, has the horn, which is a misunderstanding the Latin translation. Now, the Torah is also shown as a diptych in Christian art. What is a diptych? A diptych is really a term naming an artwork composed of two parts. The word comes from Greek dipekatus, or dipka, and it means double. The two plates are connected here, as you see, by hinges, and they allow you to tell a story in pictures. And they have, of course, this rectangle with the round top. This is the 1499 Berlin diptych, but we know that the origin of the diptych is, and in this shape, comes from tablets that have ritual purpose. as for example, the City of God of Augustine, it was written on a diptych like that. And it's a very important kind of a way to show the ritual purposes of such a shape. And we see here the very reason that we're talking about, that is something that Bamidbar Rabbah is talking about, is you see here Moses is coming down with the 10 Commandments shaped like diptych. We have the two rectangle with the round top. And here is the golden calf, and the Satan is riding up above it. And we have Aaron here that listens to the people. And this is a Romanesque church in Vézelay in France from the 12th century. And you can see here that Moses is coming down, and here, this is where he's going to break the 10 Commandments in showing when he sees what's coming against him. And Hananel Mak, in his Bamidbar Rabbah edition, talks about the editor of Bamidbar Rabbah of the opinion that here, this is exactly the reason why they started talking about the sermon against the Christian that claimed the covenant because of this sin that the Jews did. Now, in time, the image of the two stone tablets in shape of diptych became definitive, a sign of the Jews. This became a symbol of the Jews. Henry III, who reigned in England from 1216, issued an order regarding the special mark the Jews must wear on their clothes. And here you see it. See, the 10 Commandments was the sign that made them, separated them and shamed them. And this is already the sign they have here in the 13th century. Now we know that Edward I, in the third year of his reign in 1275, the Jews were expelled in 1290. He ordered that every one of them above the age of 7 will wear on his outer garment a badge of yellow cloth in the shape of 2 tablets, 6 finger long and 3 finger wide. So you could see that here it becomes already a symbol of Judaism, just like we saw that the fallen tablet in the synagogue became a symbol of synagogue. So 2 reasons for this. First, as we saw, Jewish tradition did not tend to regard the tablets and the commandments as an optum symbol of faith. So we don't have it as a symbol of Jews, because in this part, they didn't need that kind of a symbol. They didn't feel that there was any kind of a special symbol that they needed. And secondly, there has been no inner need within Judaism for a particular form of an object to symbolize, and Jewish symbols were actually influenced by Gentile symbols. We know, just like the badge, or Jews paint themselves with the Jewish hat, etc., because that became part of their existence. Now, if we look at Jewish art, and we see that the Jewish art uses both, all 3, scroll, rectangle, and diptych. Here we see in Dua Europus, we see the scroll. Here Moses is standing and he's opening a scroll. The scroll was a symbol that probably passed on from the Jews to the Christian, because we saw it in Christian art, and we saw that the Bible mentioned the scrolls. So we can see that what it says here, an important key for understanding the usage of scroll, is found in Midrash that seeks to reconcile the biblical text, which speaks of tablets, and the popular conception, which imagines scrolls. a homily by Joshua ben Nehemiah says that tablets, quote, they were miraculous objects capable of being rolled up but made of sapphire in Shir Hashirim Rabbah. So we can see that these symbols start with Judaism, then move on to Christianity, and then come back to Judaism. We have here frontispieces of Bibles that were from Egypt. This is 10th century, and you can see that we have here the shape of the 10 Commandments right here as rectangles. We can see that that's the way they symbolize it in when they want to explain what were the implements of the temple. So they give us the menorah, and here is the tabernacle and the 10 Commandments and the cherubim as well. Now, this picture shows that how the tradition from being a way to explain the tabernacle implements or the temple implements becomes a way to illustrate. Like here we have King's Bible in 1384, and it's a Jewish Bible, and you can see here the 10 Commandments in two rectangles with the cherubim on top. We can see also here two manuscripts, the Palmer Bible from 1277, and again we have the 10 Commandments, and we can see here this is a Topinyan Bible, and again we see the very traditional kind of rectangle that you see. But then here in the manuscript we have the rectangle tabernacle tablets that are in the tripartite machzor from the 14th century, and we have Regensburg Pentateuch from 1300. And look at the way they did it here. This is the giving of the Torah. So they divided it into rectangles, the first, the second, and then it becomes one. As you see, the two of them unite and become the 10 Commandments. And that's how the Israelites are receiving the Torah, and that's their idea of explaining it. Now, in the Sarajevo Bible that we have, Sarajevo Haggadah, from the 14th century, we have here the giving of the Torah, and we see Moses is coming down with diptych. We have the two rectangles with the round top that you see here, and that's a very interesting way to present it, and it follows the text that all the people saw it, and this is how they get given. Now, this is a very interesting thing that can tell us something. Okay, so I just want to show you that here we have a ark that is from Urbino in Italy, and like I said, they are arks or any kind of cupboards were not in synagogues so much, but they were furniture. And here they put inside this ark, they put the Torah, they open it up, and they have here the two tablets. And when you open, and inside we have the Torah. Now, the interesting thing is that 20 years after this was built, we have here a very famous painter who is Christian, very Christian, and he's painting Moses. His name is Justus van Gent, and he's taking the same two tablets that you see here, and he's pointing out, and here is, see, this is the cupboard that they use, and then he's pointing out here the second commandment, Lo yeh lecha, because his understanding is that now the second commandment, which taken from the Jews in the shape of a diptych, is really theirs, the Christian, and that Lo yeh lecha means that they should understand that now they are Veros Israel, and they are the ones to receive the commandments. So I'm sorry that we don't have more time to finish this, but it's a very interesting thing that I'll just go to the very end, where Bamidbar Rabbah, here, according to the Jewish understanding that finds its expression in Bamidbar Rabbah, the ark continued the holiness of both the whole tablets and the broken tablets. They were fitted together inside the ark, and they were kept together. And the quotation here is, he gave them a written Torah that had 613 mitzvot. And in the picture of Chagall, we see that instead of one hand that stretched out from heaven and gives the Torah, as we saw in Byzantine art, we have two hands. And Moses is receiving all 613 mitzvot, because this is what made our Torah different than what the Christian thought they received, because they just had the 10 commandments without the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And therefore, they did not have this as the Jews, and the quotation is from Hosea. The many teachings I wrote for him have been treated as something aligned, meaning this is what the reason Bamidbar Rabbah is making this sermon against this Christian, showing that the difference is that it's not just the 10 commandments, it's the whole Torah Sheba'al Peh. Yeh Chag Sameach v'Bsorot.
Thank you, Shula. Thank you very much. I would like to conclude, first of all, by holding up Professor Hanan Omak's edition of Bamidbar Rabbah, which I edited. And when I got to his commentary, where he started to talk about the round 10 commandments, I immediately wrote to Shula and asked her for literature on the subject, and we added it to the footnotes. So thank you very much, Shula. Second of all, Dr. Tamar Kadari, Josh, can you take down, or Shula, can you take down the picture in the middle?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Tamar Kadari mentioned the Midrash that says that Ruth did her part and Boaz did his part and God did his part. So I'd like to thank Dr. Tamar Kadari, who did her part, and Dr. Shula Lederman, who did her part, and Josh Schumann, who did his part. But last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you who now have to do your part, which is to study Torah on Shavuot during the Tikkun. So I hope that you'll all have a chance to use some of the things we discussed this evening, some of the Jewish teachings on biblical criticism, some of the Midrashim on the book of Ruth, the dramatic scene in the barn, on the threshing floor, and the fascinating topic of the shape of the 10 Commandments. If there are any rabbis still on screen, if you're in Israel on July 8th, we invite you to a barbecue at Schechter. You can get details from me or from Rabbi Matt Berkowitz. And any of you who want to be in Israel in November, we'll be holding our 40th anniversary celebration and mission, November 18th to 23rd. There are details on the Schechter website. We will be rededicating the library and administration building that I am sitting in right now. It's being renovated as we speak. And God willing, we will move back into this building in September. And we'll be having a celebration in November. And any of you can come to Israel then. We would love for you to participate in this celebration. In the meantime, Toda Rabah to all of you, and Chag Sameach.
Yisrael, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.